Hello friends, a very warm welcome to Ansarkari. I am Vikas Bhardwaj and continuing our understanding in a sequential and a very objective fashion that we have been talking about what contributions Weber did and also how it is so much crucial to understand this part. As you can see the previous lectures also and in the continuing lectures also, it is a whole series which will make you understand with clarity, and after that clarity only you can write in your own words which will be helping you to crack the code of answer writing. It will help you to crack the code of conceptual thinking. It is a way, it's a process. That's what we have been trying to achieve. So let's start. Substantive sociology is very important. So we have to understand and start like the way Weber did in his monumental work Economy and Society. Now, through his work, Economy and Society, we are able to understand what actually Weber was trying to convey with the understanding and evolution of substantive sociology. And at what level he is doing it? He is doing at the level of action and interaction. Two very key words when we speak about society, social understanding, and when we speak about from the perspective of sociology, that's what we would say. So when we start doing this, we find a kind of a paradox in Weber's work because his commitment to sociology of a small scale processes, that's what it seems his work is primarily at the large scale levels of social world. So it's a paradox going on. Like he is claiming, he is feeling, he is doing it. If I say in simple words that I actually want to decode small scale processes, but actually what he is doing, his work is primarily at the large scale levels. So again, UPSC is going to put questions, and also in answer writing, if you would say, many Weberians would disagree with this portrayal of paradox in Weber's work, but that is where you have to bring your administrative understanding. So Kalberg is also arguing that Weber offered a more fully integrated micro macro or agency structure theory. He did a lot of like this. Like it is still being decoded, it is still being interpreted what actually he represented. What is sociology? Again, coming back to the Weber's ideas. So, in articulating his view on sociology, Weber often took a stance against the large-scale evolutionary sociology. Okay, he is taking stand against that, the organicism that was pertinent in the field at that time when the Weber is operating, as we have already seen through his biography and already seen through different lectures you see previously that we are trying to create a kind of a system. For example, Weber said that I became a sociologist in order to put an end to collectivist notions. Sociology too can be practiced by proceeding from the action of one or more, few or many individuals. That means by employing a strictly individualistic method. He is saying, I am trying to study sociology from the perspective of individualist method. So he is taking an adherence to individualist method, and Weber was forced to admit that it is impossible to eliminate totally collective ideas from sociology. But on surface level, when we say that why he is trying to actually run away, why he is trying to eliminate collective ideas, because he believes they are not empirical, he believes they are not objective, he believes they are not scientific, he believes it brings bias. So that is why even when he admitted the significance of collective concepts, Weber ultimately reduced them. Even those collective concepts are reduced to patterns and regularities of individual actions. He is obsessed with identifying a certain scientific methodology. So collectivist ideas are also being converted or reduced to patterns and regularities of individual action. So for the subjective interpretation of action in sociological work, these collectivities must be treated as solely the resultants and mode of organization of the particular acts of individual persons. I repeat, these collectivities must be treated, as per Weber, as solely the resultants and the modes of organization of the particular acts of individual persons. And these alone can be treated as agents in the course of subjectively understandable action. So at the end here, like the we said in the previous para, that he is reducing the even the collective concept, he is reducing them to patterns and regularities of individual action. And again, he is saying that the resultants and the collectivities are the resultants, or you can say they are the causal action of modes of organization and also the resultants of particular acts of individual persons. So these alone can be treated as agents. So at the individual level, Weber was deeply concerned with the meaning and the way in which it was formed. Okay, up to this level, that's what we have to say. There seemed to be little doubt Weber believed in and intended to take microsociology. But what we are arguing is that whether he was able to do so or not. So, question is what he did. So Mary Fulberg, she directly addressed the discontinuity in the Weber's work. That's what Weber is claiming, but he's not able to do so. Weber's too much emphasis on the importance of individual meanings and motives in causal explanation. That means what caused it of social action does not correspond adequately with the true mode of explanation involved in his comparative historical study of the world religions. So he is claiming Weber believed us to do so, but then he is not able to do so. That is what Mary Fulbach is saying. So there is a discontinuity. He is claiming to be bringing things from micro perspective, but actually it is a big it is a collective notion. So the ultimate level of causal explanation why something happened, as we have seen in the Weber's substantive writing, is that of social structure conditions under which certain forms of meaning and motivation can achieve historical efficacy, I would say. So, ultimate reason or ultimate cause, when Weber is bringing out in his writings, in his analysis, it is the social structure conditions are the causal reasons, which under which under these conditions certain forms of meaning and motivation can have a kind of historical efficacy, or you can say historical meaning. So Lars Uden in 1981, he also cast light on this problem in interpreting Weber's work by distinguishing Weber's methodology, that's what the methods adopted by Weber, and his substantive concerns, and recognizing that there is a conflict or tension between them. Maybe when Weber is creating stuff, or when he is undergoing this tough, very very difficult mental churning process, as we have seen the kind of person he was not able to realize it. After all, he is also a human being. So Weber used an individualist and subjectivist methodology, and that is what you can always get a comment type question. That is what we have discussed till now. So he claimed to be an individualist, but what happened partially is also subjectivity or subjectivist methodology. So Weber was interested in what individuals do and why they do it. So what are their subjective motives? What they are doing it and why they are doing it. So that is what we have also philosophically debated about it. You can just write down the keywords and key points, and after that you will be able to understand that how and why he is behaving in a certain way. So when we are saying again that Weber, in the former type, Weber was interested in reducing collectivities to the actions of individuals. However, in most of his substantive sociology, Weber focused on large-scale structures such as bureaucracy or capitalism. These are large-scale structures, and he is not focally concerned with what individuals do or why they do it. So such structures are not reduced by Weber to the actions of individuals, though it seems so, and the actions of those in them are determined by the structures and not by their motives. So there is a little doubt that there is contradiction in Weber's work. That's what we are trying to prove. So individualism and also collectivism, both are parallelly and paradoxically present. Now let's see what Weber's definition of sociology was. Sociology as a science concerning itself with interpretive understanding of social action. You must mark it up, you must write it down, and then thereby repeating it, thereby with a causal explanation of its course and consequences. That is what sociology is. It must be able to interpret and understand and also identify what are the reasons and causes behind certain processes and phenomena of social action. Among the themes discussed earlier, we have already discussed and are mentioned or implied in his definition are: sociology should be a science. We have already seen that. Sociology should be concerned with causality. We have also discussed, and apparently here he was combining sociology and history, as we have discussed in one of the previous lectures. Sociology should utilize interpretive understanding. We have also discussed it first hand. So now we are ready to discuss what Weber meant by social action. Let's see what Weber meant by social action. Because if we are going to see Weber's sociology, and if we accept his words at the face value, his thinking and his work was based on his conception of social action as said by Turner. You can always quote this. So he is differentiating between the action and purely reactive behavior. Social action and obviously purely reactive behavior. And the concept of behavior is reserved. Obviously, it is why it is reserved, because it is actually subject to different kind of interpretations, and also there are different elements behind it. Automatic behavior, that means reactive behavior, it involves no thought processes. That's what we know. You are reacting, you are merely reacting, you are not thinking. So a stimulus is present and a behavior occurs with little intervening between stimulus and response. You know, so such behavior was not of any interest in Weber's sociology. He is saying that if you can't think, if you can't behave, if you cannot interpret, if you cannot analyze, then it's of no use as far as sociology is concerned. So he was concerned with action that clearly involved the intervention of thought processes and the resulting meaningful action. You are doing something, your thought process is coming into picture, and then you are actually culminating it into something else. So between the occurrence of a stimulus and ultimate response, there is thinking involved. Now this thinking is the key. So to put it slightly differently, action was said to occur when individuals attach subjective meanings to their actions. So everybody is not going to act in the same way. So the task of sociological analysis involved the interpretation of that action, interpretation of action in terms of its subjective meaning, where you are putting mind into it. A good and more specific example of Weber thinking on action is found in his discussion of economic action, in which he defined a conscious primary orientation to economic consideration. You know, a conscious primary orientation to economic consideration. So, for what matters is not objective necessity of making economic provision, but the belief that it is necessary. Okay, the belief, that means thinking is involved. So, in embedding his analysis in mental processes and the resulting meaningful action, Weber was very careful to put out that it is very wrong, it is earnest to regard psychology as the foundation of sociological interpretation of action, because we are thinking about mental processes. Because he is saying at the same point which was made by Durkheim in discussing, if we can recall Durkheim in our lectures, that there is at least some non-material social facts. That is where mental process comes into picture. That is, sociologists are interested in mental processes, but it is not the same as psychologists' interest in the mind, personality, and so forth. So Weber implied that he had a great concern with mental processes, but he is actually spending little time on them. That is why Shoes, you can always quote Shoes also, please note down in your notebook, was correct when he pointed out that although Weber's work on mental processes is suggestive, it is hardly the basis for systematic microsociology. You cannot say that it is the basis. It is definitely some element it is playing up. So this suggestiveness of Weber's work made him relevant to those who developed theories of individuals and their behavior, that is symbolic interactionism that we have studied in our next lectures, and phenomenology and so forth. So in his action theory, Weber's clear intent was to focus on individuals, patterns and regularities of action, and not on collectivity. In that regard, that's what we can say. So here action in the sense of subjectively understandable orientation of behavior. Okay, subjectively understandable, that's what we are trying to say. And according to him, action in the sense of subjectively understandable orientation of behavior exists only as the behavior of one or more individual human beings. That is where thinking comes into action. That is how social action happens, and that is why he is trying to identify the causal action behind it, and that is the kind of methodology he is using. So if you see whole thing in a chain process and read it quickly number of times, you will be able to appreciate it better. Weber was prepared to admit that for some purposes we may have to treat collectivities as individuals. But for the subjective interpretation of action in sociological work, these collectivities must be treated solely the resultants and mode of organization of particular acts of individual persons. We have already discussed this. Because you are going to treat these and these alone as agents and in the course of subjectively understandable action. Again, I am repeating. So there is a subjective interpretation, and this subjective interpretation of these collectivities, if you are treating these collectivities uh, as solely the resultants and the modes of organization of particular acts of individual persons, then you are going to treat them as agents. That is how he is thinking of bigger macro actions into micro ones. So it would seem that Weber was obviously explicit The sociology of action is ultimately concerned with individuals and not collectivities, though, as we have said, these collectivities are also the results of actions of individuals in different ways. So please go through it. I know it's a little complex, but the language, the words, and the terminology that we are using, it is linked with what Weber wanted to convey, what Weber wanted to follow on. Okay. Weber utilized his ideal type methodology to clarify the meaning of action by identifying four basic types of action. Okay, not only is this typology significant for understanding what Weber meant by action, but it is also in part basis for Weber's concern with large social structures and actions. So Weber was definitely concerned in this way, and of greatest importance is Weber's difference between the two basic types of rational action. The first is means and rationality. This is the first, very important, means and rationality, or you can say actions, that is determined by expectations as to the behavior of objects in environment and of other human beings. Means, ends, what are the means, what are the ends, and you have to interpret it rationally. So expectations as to the behavior of objects in environment and of other human beings, these expectations are used as conditions or means for the attainment of actors' own rationally pursued calculated ends. I am repeating, these expectations or these kind of desires, if I use another word, they are used as conditions or the means. Expectations are the means for the attainment of actors' own rationally pursued calculated ends. So expectations, behavior, and the end result. So the second value is rationality or action that is determined by conscious belief. Conscious belief in the value for its own sake of some ethical, aesthetic, religious, or some other form of behavior, independently of its prospects for success. You know, independently of its prospects for success. So that is the rationality, value rationality. Another thing what Weber is explaining is effectual action, which was not of too much concern for Weber, which is determined by the emotional state of the actor. Then traditional action, which were of great value for Weber, is determined by the actor's habitual and customary ways of behaving, which is repetitive in nature. It should be noted that although Weber differentiated four ideal typical forms of action, he was well aware that any action usually involves a combination of all four ideal types of action. Now, let's see how Weber is arguing that sociologists have a much better chance of understanding action of the more rational variety than they do of understanding action dominated by affect or tradition. So he is even saying that sociologists, if they believe, if they think so in that direction, they will have a better chance of more rational variety. Now let's see social stratification, what Weber believed by that, or his ideas on class, status, and party. And we will be looking at power also later on. So his analysis of stratification is one area which Weber operated at least at first as an action theorist, which is not the case previously as we have seen. So let's see class, status, and party. One important aspect of this analysis is that Weber refused to reduce stratification to economic factors only. That stratification is only because of economic factors, but he is seeing it as a multi-dimensional thing. Society is stratified on the basis of economics, status, and power. So one resulting implication is that people can rank high on one or two of these dimensions of stratifications and low on the others. That means there is a sophisticated analysis of social stratification, and it is possible to see it in that ways when certain ideas are applied. But when we see Marxist version or by the Karl Marx, he is reducing stratification to variations in one's economic situation, and that is not the case by Weber. Starting with class, so Weber adhered to his action orientation by arguing that class is not community. Rather, a class is a group of people who shared situation. Whose shared situation is possible, and at some times it is the basis for action by the group. That is what K. Smith is saying. So again, I'm repeating, he is adhering to his action orientation, though we have said that he is an action theorist. Action orientation by arguing that a class is not community, rather class is a group of people whose shared situation, they are in the same situation. Shared situation is a possible basis for action by the group because they share the same situation. So Weber contends that a class situation exists when three conditions are met. What are those three conditions? A number of people have in common a specific causal component of their life chances. Common but specific causal component of their life chances. So, can you say that aspirants, UPSC aspirants, is it a class? That's what you can think about. This component is represented exclusively by economic interest in the possession of goods and opportunities for income. That is the second condition. Okay, exclusively by economic interest in the possession of goods and opportunities for income, and this is representing under the conditions of commodity or labor markets. These are the three things. This class situation, that is the concept of class, refers to any group of people found in the same class situation. Therefore, according to Weber, class is not a community but merely a group of people in the same economic or market situation. But in contrast to class, when we say status or groups, what are those? Status or groups, or you can say status groups, they are ordinarily communities, but they are amorphous. They are not very concrete. They are, fluid. So status situation, status group, that is why concept of status situation is coming. Every typical component of the life of men determined by a specific, positive, negative, or social estimation of honor. That is status situation. Status situation is defined by Weber as every typical component of the life of men that is determined by specific, positive, negative, or social estimation of honor. So, as a general rule, status is associated with the style of life. Status relates to consumptions of good produced, whereas class relates to economic production. Very different things. So those at the top of class status hierarchy have a different lifestyle than those at the bottom. In this case, lifestyle or status is related to class situation. Again, I'm repeating same thing. Please understand carefully. So at the top of status hierarchy, you have a different lifestyle. Those are at the bottom of status hierarchy, they have a different lifestyle, but this is related to class situation. But the question arises, is the class and status, they are always linked with each other? They are not. They are not necessarily linked to one another. Money and entrepreneurial position are not in themselves status qualifications. Money and an entrepreneurial position are not themselves in status qualifications, although they may lead to them. Okay, they may lead to what I should say, a class and status. And the lack of property is not in itself a status disqualification, but lack of property may be a reason for it. So there is a complex set of relationships between class and status, and it is even more complicated when we add dimension of party. So class, status, party. So classes exist in the economic order, status groups in the social order. Parties can be found in political order. So to Weber, parties are always such structures which are struggling for domination. You can always quote Girth and Mills in this. And the parties are the most organized elements of Weber's stratification system. It's again a fact. So Weber thought of parties very broadly, including not only those that exist in state, but also those exist in social clubs. So parties usually, but not always, they represent class or status groups. Whatever they represent, parties are oriented to attainment of power. Although Weber remained close to his action approach, his ideas on social stratification, these ideas already indicate a movement in the direction of macro level and structures. In most of his other work, Weber focused on such large scale units of analysis. Large scale units of analysis. It is not that Weber is losing sight of the action, The actor simply moved from being the focus of his concern, actor, okay, to being largely dependent variable. Actor becomes a dependent variable determined by variety of large scale forces. The large scale forces are becoming actually the actors. Okay, he is the focus. He is not the focus of concern. The focus of concern are large scale forces. Variable is determined by large scale forces. For example, Weber believed that individual Calvinists, they are impelled or they are forced to act in a certain way by the norms, values and beliefs of their religion. But his focus was not on individual Calvinist, but on the collective forces which are forcing the Calvinist to act in the certain way. That is why we have discussed today very important the key terms, and we will be taking it further by the remaining ideas and remaining concepts given by Weber. Please do make your own short notes, revise it. Please make sure that you are writing the quotes and statements, and then only after thorough revision, when you are enjoying what Weber is saying and you are trying to recall and also reconnect it, I'm sure you're going to score very good marks as far as the topic is concerned. Thank you very much and see you in the next session.